The hearing room in New York's federal court building is crowded when Virginia Hill Hauser, the fabulous sweetheart of the slain Bugsy Siegel, notorious underworld figure, answers her subpoena.
Old Hollywood glittered on the surface, but behind the studios and champagne nights worked another silent force: organized crime. From mob-financed nightclubs and Vegas casinos to personal relationships that spiraled into scandal, some of the era's brightest actresses found themselves closer to the underworld than they ever expected. These 12 stories reveal how the glamour, the nightlife, and the mob often collided in ways the public never saw.
Did you ever get any money from any other person whom we might call a gangster other than Siegel?
No.
1. Virginia Hill, Queen of the Mob. Virginia Hill, 1916 to 1966, is one of the most thoroughly documented women associated with the American underworld. In the early 1940s, she acted as a courier and money handler for the Chicago outfit, a role later referenced in multiple law enforcement investigations. Her connections ran through figures such as Jack Guzik and, most famously, Benjamin Bugsy Siegel, with whom she developed a close personal relationship. By the mid-1940s, Hill's ties to Siegel increasingly brought her into the orbit of Las Vegas, where Siegel was involved in early casino development, including the Flamingo Hotel. Hill left the United States shortly before Siegel's murder in Beverly Hills on June 20, 1947. A move that several contemporaries claimed was made at his urging. She spent the following years in Europe, living primarily in Switzerland, Austria, and Italy. On March 24, 1966, Hill was found dead in Salzburg. The official ruling was by barbiturate overdose, though some writers have noted unusual details in the toxicology reports, leaving room for speculation. Despite the myths that later surrounded her life, Hill's documented activities place her among the closest real points of contact between organized crime and the social world that surrounded Hollywood in the 1940s. 2. Lana Turner, the Stompanato case. Lana Turner's connection to organized crime circles centers on her relationship with Johnny Stompanato, a man widely described as mob-linked and reputedly associated with Los Angeles crime figure Mickey Cohen. By 1957, their relationship was publicly visible and marked by frequent disputes. Later testimonies from Turner's staff and friends described intimidation, threats, and controlling behavior from Stompanato. Contemporary reports and Cohen's own acquaintances often referred to Stompanato as part of the entourage that surrounded Cohen, though the exact nature of his role remains loosely defined. On April 4, 1958, a violent confrontation erupted inside Turner's Beverly Hills home. During the altercation, Turner's 14-year-old daughter, Cheryl Crane, intervened to protect her mother and fatally stabbed Stompanato. A coroner's inquest quickly ruled the act justifiable homicide. The event triggered massive national coverage and became one of the defining Hollywood scandals of the decade. Turner faced no criminal charges, but the case exposed how individuals tied to organized crime environments sometimes intersected with the private lives of major stars. For Turner, the tragedy marked one of the most publicly scrutinized and emotionally turbulent chapters of her career. 3. Jean Harlow, Longy Zwillman's influence. Jean Harlow's link to organized crime comes through Abner Longy Zwillman, a major East Coast mob figure active in the 1920s-30s. Several biographical accounts describe Harlow and Zwillman maintaining a brief relationship during the early 1930s. Around the same period, Zwillman provided a substantial personal loan to Columbia Pictures head Harry Cohn, a loan that contemporaries connected to Harlow's two-picture deal at the studio. While not illegal, this showed how mob capital occasionally reached into Hollywood's business structures. Harlow was not personally tied to the underworld, but Zwillman's interest in Hollywood was strategic. He used film financing and social connections as a way to move influence westward. Harlow's own life already contained dark elements, including the 1932 death of her husband, Paul Byrne. The case generated rumors, some involving pressure from powerful outsiders, though investigators publicly ruled that he died by self-inflicted causes. Zwillman later appeared in the 1950s organized crime investigations before his own death in 1959, officially ruled suicide. The brief intersection between Harlow and Zwilman remains one of the clearest examples of how mob money touched studio-era careers. 4. Mae West, backed by Owney Madden. Mae West's early career in New York overlapped with Owney Madden, one of the most influential mob bosses of the Prohibition era. Madden controlled multiple nightclubs, most famously the Cotton Club, and used entertainment venues as fronts for his bootlegging and racketeering operations. Several contemporaries and historians confirm that West and Madden maintained a close personal relationship in the late 1920s, shortly after the success of West's controversial stage play Sex, 1926, which resulted in her short jail sentence. Madden's support gave West access to top-tier venues and protection at a time when the nightlife entertainment was heavily shaped by mob interests. When West moved to Hollywood in the early 1930s, their direct contact decreased, but her early rise had been inseparable from New York's underworld-backed club scene. West is one of the few major actresses whose formative years were directly linked to an active crime boss with measurable influence over entertainment circuits. 5. Thelma Todd, a death surrounded by rumors. Thelma Todd became indirectly linked to the era's underworld mainly through her marriage to Pasquale "Pat" DeSico, a Hollywood agent known for moving in circles that included several influential East Coast figures. Their 1932 marriage was brief and troubled, leading to a separation 2 years later. Afterward, Todd devoted her energy to running Thelma Todd's Sidewalk Cafe, a popular Pacific Coast highway establishment she co-owned with director Roland West. The venue drew a mix of Hollywood personalities and nightlife regulars, naturally placing it within the larger social ecosystem of Los Angeles during that time. On December 16, 1935, Todd was discovered unresponsive in her car at a property associated with Jewel Carmen, the estranged wife of Roland West. The official investigation concluded that the cause was accidental carbon monoxide exposure. Still, the circumstances prompted long-lasting speculation, fueled by the cafe's bustling reputation and DeCicco's earlier associations. No verified evidence ever indicated wrongdoing, yet the situation became one of Hollywood's most frequently revisited mysteries. Todd's story reflects how the entertainment world, business partnerships, and the city's nightlife environment sometimes intertwined in ways that left room for lingering questions. 6. Jean Carmen, inside Johnny Roselli's circle. Jean Carmen spent several years in the social orbit of Johnny Roselli, the Chicago outfit's representative in Los Angeles and Las Vegas. Carmen's own autobiographical accounts, later supported by period travel records, place her in Las Vegas casinos in the early 1950s, staying at hotels partly financed by mob interests. Roselli reportedly used Carmen's skills as a trick-shot golfer to hustle wealthy gamblers, something mentioned by sports columnists of the era. Roselli himself was deeply embedded in Las Vegas's development and later became known for his involvement in political and intelligence-related scandals. Carmen also described friendships with Hollywood personalities, including Marilyn Monroe, and claimed that Roselli advised her to leave Los Angeles after Monroe's death in 1962. While this warning cannot be independently verified, Carmen's long disappearance from Hollywood during the 1960s is documented. Her story offers a first-hand look at the entertainment and gambling landscape at a time when mob-controlled venues shaped much of the industry. 7. Jayne Mansfield, Sonny Franzese's claims. Jayne Mansfield appears in mafia history mainly through John Sonny Franzese, underboss of the Colombo crime family. In multiple interviews given late in his life, Franzese claimed he had a brief affair with Mansfield in the early 1960s after meeting her at the Latin Quarter nightclub in New York, a venue known from NYPD Vice reports for long-standing mob influence. These claims cannot be independently confirmed, but they are consistent with Francese's documented presence in the same nightlife circles Mansfield frequented. Mansfield's career regularly brought her into contact with venues run or financed by organized crime, especially casinos and nightclubs in Las Vegas and Miami. Historical records show she performed at the Flamingo and other strip properties during a period when casino financing often involved crime families such as the Chicago outfit and the New York families. Although her 1967 death in a car accident near New Orleans was conclusively ruled accidental, caused by a truck slowing behind a mosquito fogging vehicle, rumors of mob involvement quickly circulated. No evidence has ever supported these theories. Mansfield's story illustrates how fame, nightlife, and the mob overlapped, even when direct personal involvement was limited. 8. Betty Grable, through George Raft. Betty Grable, the most photographed woman of World War II, had indirect links to the underworld through her brief relationship with actor George Raft. Raft grew up in New York's Hell's Kitchen and became closely associated with figures such as Oni Madden and Meyer Lansky. FBI files repeatedly list Raft as a social contact of mob members and note his appearances at venues frequented by organized crime. His friendships with Bugsy Siegel and other mob-linked personalities were widely discussed in Hollywood and Las Vegas. During the early 1940s, Grable and Raft spent time together while Raft was active in Hollywood's nightclub scene. Although Grable herself had no ties to criminal activity, performers around Raft inevitably moved through nightlife environments partially controlled by mob-backed investors. Raft's long-standing associations eventually damaged his career. By the mid-1960s, he was refused entry into the United Kingdom due to concerns over his criminal connections. Grable's proximity to Raft situates her on the edges of a Hollywood social world where entertainers, gamblers, and mob intermediaries often mixed. 9. Marie McDonald, the 1957 kidnapping case. Marie McDonald, known as The Body, became the center of one of Hollywood's strangest mid-century episodes in January 1957. She reported to police that two unidentified men had forced her from her Encino home and later left her near Indio. Her distressed condition drew immediate attention, and the case quickly made headlines. As investigators looked deeper, the situation became increasingly unclear. There were no ransom demands, physical evidence was minimal, and key details did not align. Authorities neither confirmed nor dismissed McDonald's account, which only fueled speculation. In a Hollywood climate already shaped by sensational crime stories, the mention of unfamiliar men with accents pushed the public to assume possible underworld involvement, even though no link was ever found. The case ultimately closed without resolution. Today, it stands as an example of how, in the atmosphere of 1950s Hollywood, almost any unexplained incident involving an actress could ignite rumors about organized crime, even when those rumors rested on nothing more than ambiguity and imagination. 10. Peggy Lee, singing in the Copacabana circuit. Peggy Lee rose to national fame performing at major nightclubs, many of which operated under the influence of organized crime. The Copacabana in New York, where Lee headlined in the 1940s, was run by manager Jules Podell under the protection of mob boss Frank Costello. FBI surveillance and press investigations from the period consistently cite the Copacabana as a Genovese family interest. These clubs were crucial for exposure, and almost all major singers passed through them, creating an unavoidable overlap with mob-controlled entertainment systems. Lee also performed at Los Angeles venues such as Cairo's and the Mocambo, each appearing in police reports for illegal gambling or bookmaking activities tied to local underworld figures. Lee herself had no involvement with criminal networks, but her professional trajectory ran through an infrastructure shaped by racketeering, nightclub monopolies, and union pressures linked to mob intermediaries. Her career exemplifies how mainstream entertainers operated inside entertainment networks financed or managed by organized crime without ever engaging with it directly. 11. Dorothy Dandridge, navigating mob-influenced venues. Dorothy Dandridge, one of Hollywood's first major African-American leading ladies, worked extensively in nightclubs during the 1940s and early 1950s. Years when many top venues were influenced by organized crime. She performed at the Mocambo in Los Angeles and the Chez Paree in Chicago, both of which appear in historical accounts as locations where management cooperated with or relied on underworld operators for protection and financing. Payment ledgers and booking arrangements from these clubs often involved intermediaries later identified in Chicago outfit or Los Angeles crime investigations. Dandridge faced additional challenges due to racial segregation. She often entered through service entrances and was barred from staying at the venues where she headlined. These restrictions were enforced by a combination of club policy and outside pressure, sometimes involving individuals connected to local rackets. Though Dandridge had no personal ties to mobsters, her career was shaped by dependence on these venues. As corporate entertainment expanded in the late 1950s, the decline of mob-run nightlife contributed to instability in her bookings. Dandridge's story shows how systemic criminal influence, rather than personal involvement, affected black performers navigating mid-century show business. 12. Lili St. Burlesque in mob territory. Lili St. was among America's most famous burlesque performers, working in cities where nightlife and gambling were deeply intertwined with organized crime. Throughout the 1940s and 1950s, she headlined at Los Angeles clubs, Las Vegas casinos, and major Montreal theaters. Many burlesque venues of this period, particularly in Montreal and Vegas, operated in markets influenced by local gambling syndicates or corrupt municipal officials. Reports from Los Angeles vice operations in the late 1940s document repeated obscenity charges against St. Cyr's shows, reflecting broader tensions between law enforcement, politics, and venue owners. St. Cyr's performances at high-profile theaters, including the El Rancho Vegas and the Gaiety Theater, placed her inside regions where casino operators and club managers often negotiated with underworld figures. She was known for maintaining strict financial control over her acts, but the industry around her was shaped by the mob's involvement in licensing, venue ownership, and nightclub protection. St. Cyr's career illustrates how burlesque functioned within older entertainment economies that frequently overlapped with criminal networks. 12 actresses, 12 different paths, but the same shadow followed them all, the shadow of organized crime. In old Hollywood, the mob didn't need to be on the screen. It was already behind the scenes.